Hi people, this is Levi. I wanted to make a video about the meanings of the houses. There's already so much information out there on current transits that I thought it would be meaningful to talk a little bit about the meanings of the houses as described in Brihad Parashara Hora Shastra, which is probably the most important piece of literature on the subject of Vedic astrology, along with Jaimini Upadesha Sutras and some other books, of course. Now I realize that the biggest part of the public watching this channel is focused on Western astrology, but both systems apply the same meanings of the houses, and maybe you find some new stuff here. So let's dive in. Let's start with the first house. That's a reasonable thing to do, right? See, the moment you were born, the tropical sign that was rising on the eastern horizon is the sign of your ascendant, right? And that is the first house. See, if we apply the whole sign system, the ascendant sets the stage for all areas in life that the planets rule, right? As Vigdakara eloquently states. So, eastern horizon, sunrise are symbolic for the birth of new things, right? So, what is being born here? It is the physical body, right? It is the vehicle via which we will try to accomplish our goals on this physical plane, Earth, right? So, the first and foremost, the first house is associated with our body, and our appearance. Um, Along with that, it represents our strengths and our weaknesses. How comfortable do we feel in our body is seen from the first house, right? See, the first house is such an important house. Why? Because in Vedic astrology, it is both a trine and an angle house. Trines are associated with ease, with inspiration, with dharma. Angles are associated with action and initiative. If we look at the original first, fifth, and ninth sign, they are the fire signs, right, of Aries. Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. They are the fire signs, so they have to do with inspirations, right? So the first house is an inspirational house. It is a trine house, but it is also an angle house. The original first, fourth, seventh, and tenth signs are the cardinal signs, right? It is the sign of Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. Aries is is the first sign of the zodiac, right? It is where the sun rises at the vernal equinox. It is where the sun sets her goal to travel up north, right? And she's gonna arrive in Cancer and reach her highest point relative to the equator, which in the northern hemisphere is gonna be summertime, right? And then she's gonna set course for Libra, where she's gonna set, right, which is the autumn equinox, and so forth and so on. So they have to do with initiative, action, and setting new goals. So the first house is also that. It is both a trine and an angle house, and that's why it's such a powerful point in the horoscope to examine. The first house is associated with our swadharma, our natural inclination. So if you're having a hard time finding a real career or something you need to express in this lifetime, look at the first house. See, the first and the 10th house are associated numerologically, right? They both have the number 1. So if you look at the 10th house has more to do with your occupation, with your fulfilling your obligations. The first house is dharma also. So check both houses definitely to come to a more grounded conclusion, we could say. Now, one of the nice things or the great things to check is like, look where your ascendant lord goes to. In which house does it go to in your horoscope? That will be the area in life that the person is most involved with. You see, the first house is the body, and the ascendant lord, right, is the actions of the body. So where does your body go to, right? Also, additionally, you can check the planet with the highest degree in your horoscope, which is the Atmakaraka. Accept Rahu, Ketu, and the outer planets, and see where that planet goes to in the horoscope. And so that also will be an area in life that you are heavily involved with. Less commonly known about the first house is that it's a house that it represents your ability to cognize. It represents your ability to grasp things, to deal with impressions that come in, right? I think that's very valuable to know. I also mentioned, the comforts of the body. So how comfortable are you in your body, right? Our strengths, weaknesses, and how comfortable we are. We need to have a healthy body and a strong body to, accomplish our goals in kind of effective manner. I think that's enough about the first house, right? Let's jump to the second house. What is the second house? So if we visualize the wheel here, the wheel perspective, the first house is here, right? And what's below the second house? So this house supports this house, right? The second house supports the first house. So the second house represents all things that support our physical body and our life path. So what is that? That's going to be food, right? Obviously, we need food to survive. We need money to survive. So it represents our wealth also. The second house represents our responsibilities, right? The things we are responsible for, and that gives us, in some way, a feeling of value. So our self-value is also associated with this. Our family is very important. If we grow up, when we grow up, yes, our family and our close friends will, support us in our life path. See, the moment you stop being responsible for something, that thing dies, right? Or it just vanishes out of your life. It just goes away. So in that sense, the second house is a house associated with death also. In Vedic Astrology, we have this concept called Bhavat Bhavam, which means house-to-house relationship. So I'm going to jump a little ahead here to explain this concept. The 8th house is the house of life force, right? The 7th house is the house of death. Why? The 12th house is the loss, right? Any loss, the loss from the house is always the 12th house. So if we take the 12th from the 8, it's the 7th house. So the 7th house is associated with death. So if we apply this here, the 8 from the 8th house, see, the 8th house is our life force. And then I'm going to add the same number, 8, and I say the 8 from the 8. So I arrive at the 3rd house. So the 8th and the 3rd house are closely related to each other. If I say the 8th house is about our life force, then the 3rd house is going to be a secondary house to examine life force and death, etc. The 12th from the 3rd house, I mentioned the 12th is the loss from a house. The 12th from the 3rd house is the 2nd house, right? And that's how they arrive at this conclusion. Now, this has been researched, right? It's just not just fancy theory, but this has been examined, and that planets, when you're running the dasha of planets in the 2nd house or the 2nd house lord, this could inflict death on some level in your life. Also, the 2nd house is associated with collections, which is, an extension of wealth. We could say, like, if you want to collect art or, statues or music or anything, this is going to be seen from the 2nd house, which I thought it was an interesting thing. Also, gems, minerals, etc., jewels, are seen from the 2nd house. Enough of the 2nd house, let's go to the 3rd house. What is the 3rd house? The 3rd house, commonly known, is the house of our skills, right? It's commonly known the house of our communications. The 4th house is what is below. It is what is deep inside of us. It is what we what we crave for, what we want, what is deeply inside of us, right? It's our heart. So to express this in the world, we need to develop skills. That's why, the 3rd and the 4th are close to each other, right? They're next to each other. We need to develop skills to express this in the world, what, we deeply feel. Now, to do this, we need courage, right? We need courage, and we need will, self-will, to be able to do this. In Brihat Parashara Shastra, it is mentioned as Upadesha, which means initiatory instructions. The 3rd house is associated with all things that are difficult. That's why it's, associated with intelligence. Discernment is a word here. Your ability to apply simple logic. Upadesha, initiatory instructions, is learning new things, learning how to play an instrument, learning a new language. This is all difficult things, right? Learning to get along with your siblings when you're young, even if you have a good relationship, it can be a challenge. Dealing with employees, right? With people that work for you. See, short distance travel, short trips can also be like, a train. You have to go from one place to another. It's all things that are difficult to learn, right? Now, less commonly known about the third house, and I mentioned before the second house being the house, a Maraka house, or I didn't mention it was a Maraka house, but in Vedic astrology they call it a Maraka house, which is a death inflicting house. Now, the second from the second, if we apply the Bhavat Bhavan principle, is the third house, so they're also related, right? And Brihad Parashura mentions deprivation of parents. So when you're running the dasha of the planets in the third house, or of a planet in the third house, or the third house lord, this could mean your parents, can go through a difficult time. So I think I mentioned most things from the third house. Also communications and media. We can extended meanings as media and communications, and the internet and all this. You can conclude or arrive to the conclusions for yourself. Yes. So from the third we go to the fourth house. I already mentioned that the fourth house is about what we deeply crave for. It's our yearnings. If we visualize the wheel, right? The first house, the fourth house is the house below, right? It is the lowest point in the horoscope, so it is what is deep inside of us. Our heart is deep inside of us, right? So the things we crave for, the things we yearn, our desires. So if you constantly long for a partner, check out the seventh lord. Maybe it goes to the fourth house, right? The fourth house is associated with all luxurious things like vehicles and all kind of comforts also. And if you want to buy a nice couch, a luxurious couch or something to relax on, that's going to be seen from the fourth house. Also things that are fixed assets like our land and deposits and our property are seen from the fourth house. It is what is deep inside, so it has to do with nourishment, with our emotional stability, with mother's nourishment, so it's related to the mother also. It is the fourth house is the heart. It is the seat of the soul, right? So it's a very important house. If you have malefics in the fourth house like Saturn or Rahu or Ketu or something, this could initially mean that the emotional life is being challenged, or it can be a difficult emotional life, and that your soul is making sure that you balance this aspect during this lifetime, especially if Rahu is there, or Ketu. This can be it's clearly indicative of balancing karmas concerning this. Right, I think that's enough about the fourth house. Let's go to the fifth house. What is the fifth house? We developed our skills in the third house, and then the fourth house is what we deeply feel. And we're going to express this. We're going to be creative in the fifth house, right? So the fifth house is a house of knowledge and intelligence. It's about our creative intelligence. The third house is our more technical intelligence. The fifth house is about our creative intelligence. So we can see that if we want to make like children, for example, are one of the highest forms of creation, right? I mean, to create a human being, another human being is a very creative endeavor. Obviously, it's associated with yantra and mantra and amulets, things that you can express creatively, things that you from the heart, you express from the heart, like when you're like romance is one of the things associated, of course, right? So if your ascendant lord goes due to the 5th house, it means that you're constantly going after your inspirations, your creative. You need to express yourself on a creative level. Or if the Atmakaraka is there, so the planet with the highest degrees, check that too. That's going to be a person that is highly creative and constantly involved with creative endeavors. Now, see, the 1st house, less commonly known, is the 5th house, excuse me, less commonly known is a house that is associated with consistency and continuance. That's a really good one to remember. Consistency. Why? You see, it's the 5th sign, original 5th sign, is a sign of Leo, right? So it's ruled by the sun, and the sun is all about consistency. It's the authority, right? It needs to be consistent. Consistent and continuance is the our 2 words here. See, the 5th house can also be, and also less commonly known, can be a fall from royalty. If we apply the Bhavat Bhavam principle, if we take the 8th house, right, the house of breaks, and we apply, we say the 10th house is the house of career, right? So if we take the 8 from the 10th, we arrive at the 5th house. And the 5th house can be a fall from royalty, so a fall from status. So, you can check this. If you know people who have experienced this, you can check what dasha they were running. Maybe they were running the dasha of the 5th lord, or the dasha of planets in the 5th house. You see, the 5th house is, there's an avasta in Vedic astrology, a condition that, you see, if the sun, Saturn, or Mars are with any planet in the 5th house, that planet gets shamed. You see, there is shame involved in this. So you can look at this. Okay, so I think that's enough about the 5th house. I'm gonna pause the video here for a while. I'm gonna make another video about the 6th to the 12th house. And I hope this has been insightful or meaningful to you. If you have any questions, you can ask them in the comments section below, and I will talk to you very soon. Thank you. Bye. Hi people, Levi again. Part 2 of the meanings of the houses. I think we arrived at the 6th house. What is the 6th house? The 7th house is the other. The 1st house is you. The 6th house is what supports the other on some level, right? The 1st house is the body. The 7th house is the death of the body. Everything that supports the death of the body, we could say. So the 6th house, for that, represents your enemies. All sorts of enemies, like injuries, cuts, accidents, deaths, people you don't get along with, daily struggles also, right? Because it supports the death of the body in some respect, right? You need to put your energy into solving problems, so it's going to drain your energy. One interesting point I heard Ken Rao make, or one of his teachers, was that it also represents one-pointed focus. And if you think about it, the original 6th sign of Virgo has to do with healing, right? Like the Mercury and Moon combinations, Moon being, supportive, and the Moon is able to renew and adapt. And if you combine those, the Moon with Mercury, that's a healer combinations, especially if the 6th house is involved. You can check this in your horoscope. It's potential healing combinations. So, and overcoming your enemies, one-pointed focus is, meditation is one of the ways to overcome your enemies. It's probably, it's one of the things you need to integrate in your life to overcome your own demons, right? In your own, yourself or your enemy, your worst enemy, right? So less commonly known about the 6th house is that it represents your stepmother. And if you have one, it represents the stepmother, I should say, and also the maternal uncle. So, the 6th house is a house of intelligence, along with, the 3rd and the 5th house. The 3rd and the 5th houses are more, it's more technical intelligence, or the fifth house is about your creative intelligence. The third house is more technical. The sixth house is overcoming problems, injuries, and it's about investigation also, because it's the original sign of Virgo is ruled by Mercury, and it's all about investigation, right? So let's jump to the seventh house. What is the seventh house? The seventh house is directly opposite the first house, right? You are the first house, the body. The seventh house is the death of the body. You see, it is where, at the autumn equinox, right? It is, it's when the sun enters Libra, right? So, the first house represents, because Saturn is exalted in Libra, right? So Saturn is associated with death also. It's exalted in Libra, and it has a great directional strength in the seventh house. It means that it becomes powerful in directional strength in the seventh house. So the seventh house, when the first house is the body, the seventh house is the other body, right? So it's the body of your spouse, and your husband, your wife, because it's the furthest away from the first house. It's directly opposite. It's associated with long distance journeys, and if you want to move abroad or something like that, then you should definitely look at the seventh house. The seventh sign, Libra, is the sign that is associated with trade, right? It's ruled by Venus. Venus is about your self-value, represents your self-value, the measurement by which you allow things in or block things out. It's the scales, right? It's about trade. So the seventh house is a very important house to look at for trade. The seventh house is also a Maraca house, like the second house I mentioned in previous video. The 8th house is the life force, and the 12th house is the loss, right? The loss. So if we apply the Bhavat Bhavan principle, the 12th from the 8th house is the break, the loss. I should say the loss of the life force is the 7th house, which is the death of the body, right? It's where the sun sets. Enough about the 7th house. Let's move on to the 8th house. What is the 8th house? The 8th house is about your longevity. It is your longevity. The 8th house is about your psychological integrity, about how strong you are to resist psychological disturbances or imbalances. In Brihat Parashara, it's described as, translated impassibles, strongholds, fortresses. How strong are you equipped? It's about chronic diseases, the 8th house. The 8th house is such an interesting house because it's such an unpredictable house, right? It's about battles, it's about cheats, right? Getting cheated. Battles, gang fights, court cases, all sorts of battles are seen from the 8th house. The 6th house is the house of your enemies, the 8th house is the house of the battle, and the 12th house is the result of the battle. So you can look at those houses, those rulers, and how well they are dignified and aspected, etc., to get some insight in those things. Also, Brihat Parashara mentions wealth of the dead and the soul's course. So wealth of the dead, the second from the 7th, right, is the 8th house, right? The second being a financial, your wealth. It's money. It has to do with finances. So the finances from the other, the spouse. So it has to do with inheritances, the 8th house, right? The money that comes in from others, that you don't have to work for yourself. I think that's about it. Also the occult, of course, all occult matters are seen from the 8th house. So if you're watching this video, you probably have some strong 8th house influence. Look at, your 8th house lord, and probably it's, prominently placed. All occult matters are seen from the 8th house. What about the 9th house? The 9th house is a trine house, right? The 1st, the 5th, and the 9th house are trine houses. They have to do with your inspiration. You see, Jupiter, because both Vedic and Western astrologer use the aspects, right? The square and the trines. But you see, the trine comes from Jupiter's planetary aspects, or yes, the aspect Jupiter makes. Jupiter aspects the 5th house, the 7th house, and the 9th house. All right, and that's from the 1st to the 5th is the trine, right? And then from the 7th to the 5th and the 7th to the 9th is a sextile, which is also a harmonious aspect, right? And then from the 1st to the 9th is also a trine. So that's why trines are harmonious aspects, because Jupiter is the great benefic, right? And he gives his benefic aspects. So the 9th house, the original 9th sign is ruled, by Jupiter. It's Sagittarius sign. It has to do with luck, with setting goals, good fortune. It has to do with a religious law, with dharma, right? It has to do with pilgrimages. So travel that inspires you. If you need to go to a conference, to astrology conference, or to a great concert on the other side of the globe, or anything that inspires you, that is seen from the 9th house. The 3rd house is the house of short distance travel. The 7th house, long distance journeys. The 9th house is about pilgrimages, travel that inspires you. And the 12th house is about, travel beyond this physical plane, dreams, etc. See, in fact, the 9th house is all forces that is about forces that are beyond your control. Like if you believe in God or in aliens or in anything you want to believe in, then that is seen from the 9th house. If we apply the Bhavad Bhavam principle, then we can see, for example, that the 7th from the 3rd, the 3rd being the siblings, right? The 7th is the spouse, so the spouse of the siblings. The 3rd from the 7th is the 9th house. So you can look at it from that perspective. Let's move on to the 10th house. What is the 10th house? The 10th house is the house above, right? It is the highest point in the horoscope. It has to do with status. It has to do with your obligations, your occupations. It's the house of karma, of actions. Karma means action. So from a traditional, from family, concept, the father is the authority, the highest point in the horoscope, right? So the father is seen from the 10th house. Now, actually, it is the actions of the father that are seen from the 10th house. And I forgot to mention this about the 9th house. The 9th house is also associated with the DNA of the father. So the genes you inherit from your father are seen from the 9th house. The actions of the father are seen from the 10th house. It is also has to do with respect, right? The respect of the father. So this association is also made. The respect you get. So there are some interesting Bhavad Bhavam examples I got from Ernst Wilhelm. And these are, for example, if you look at the 4th house, this is about the 10th house, but the 4th house is the mother, right? And the 10th house is, the respect. So the 10th from the 4th house is the 1st house. It's the respect she gets, right? So you should respect your mother, right? Now, also, the 10th house is the obligation. So the 10th from the 4th, the obligation of the mother, is the 1st house. It's you, right? I think that's interesting. So you see, this whole Bhavad Bhavan concept is very interesting, and it really broadens your perspective and deepens your knowledge about how the houses are related. It really, propels you into, thinking about it and imagining all sorts of connections. And that's, the fun thing also about astrology. It just opens your brain. So also applying the Bhavad Bhavan concept is, the 7th, so the home being the 4th house, and then the 7th being, the furthest away is, representing long distance travel. So the 7th from the 4th house is the absence from the home, right? So absence from home is seen from the 10th house. And also obligations, generally your obligations are seen from the 10th house. Let's move on to the 11th house. The 11th house, it is mentioned in Brihadarashtra Shastra, acquisitions of various objects, is a translation, which means like, acquiring anything you, or desire, what you desire on a material level is seen from the 11th house. The 11th house is an Upachaya house. It is the strongest Upachaya house. So Upachaya meaning growing, right? The 3rd house, the 6th house, the 10th and the 11th house are the Upachaya houses, of which the 11th house is the strongest Upachaya house. See, titles, it's things that grow, right? So first you become a soldier, then a lieutenant, then a corporal, etc. It grows with time. So titles are seen from the 11th house. It is a finance house. It's a house associated with finances, gains. So you see, if you have your ascendant lord in the 11th house, or you have planets in the 11th house, and you're running the dashas, or the planetary period of those planets, that can indicate a time that your wealth and you gain, that your wealth grows, and that you gain in life. It's very strongly, it really works. This has been researched. It works. So the 11th house being a finance, a house associated with finances. You see, it represents the money that comes in. If you're self-employed, it's the money that comes in before it gets taxed and everything. And if we apply again the Bhavat Bhavan principle, we see that, the 4th house was, besides the home, it's also the bank and deposits, right? So the 4th house, the 4th from the 11th, no, I should say, yes, the 4th from the 11th is the 2nd house, which is your wealth, right? This is what you keep to buy your food with and clothes with. So the 11th house, the money, the 11th house is the money that comes in. The 4th house, you put it in a bank. In the 2nd house, so the 4th from the 11th is what you keep. So that's a kind of an interesting way to look at it. Less commonly known is that the 11th house is associated with domesticated animals. So you gain from those animals, like cows, and you get milk from a cow, or eggs from chickens, etc. So domesticated animals are seen from that, from the 11th house. See, pets are 4th house. Wild animals are 6th house, and are the 6th house, or seen from the 6th house, and domesticated animals from the 11th house. So our aspirations, our goals, right? They also grow over time, right? We set new goals, also seen from the 11th house. So it's the strongest Upachaya house, which grows with time. I think that's about it for the 11th house. Now, the last house to examine is the 12th house. The 12th house is, everybody knows, the house of expenses and losses, right? It is the loss also of the physical body in some respect. So it's about dreaming, about leaving other planes, leaving for other planes. It's about dreaming. It's about escapism. It's about escaping the physical body, right? It is just, it's very close to the physical body, but it's about, outer body experiences, etc. are seen from the 12th house, and, how this, may, play out in your life. You can look at your 12th lord or planets in the 12th house. If you, for example, have Saturn in the 12th house, this can, inflict some fear, for example, Saturn associated with fear, right? Or maybe you have an exalted Venus as your 12th lord, and you have an amazing dream life, or you just, in some way dreams help you progress in life and help to nourish your soul, for example. An exalted Venus can do that for you, because also in dreams we work on our karmas, right? And then, very interesting to know is that, what I thought it was interesting is that the 12th house is the house of the gain of your last possession. So before you leave this earth, before you depart into, hyperspace, whether your last desire will be fulfilled is seen from the second house. All right. So, again, check where your ascendant lord goes to, which house it goes to. That will be the area in life that you are most involved with. Also, check the planet with the highest degree in your horoscope, except Rahu, Ketu, and the outer planets, and see where that planet goes to in your horoscope, which house it goes to. And also that will be an area in life that you are highly involved with. Look at dignity of planets, look at dignity in the Navamsha, look at aspects, is the planet aspected by friends, enemies, benefics, malefics, and you will get a general idea about what the situation is concerning the houses in your horoscope and the planets in the houses of theirs, So enough said, right? I hope this was beneficial to you. I hope this broadens your perspective of the houses, this broadens your perspective or knowledge of the houses. And I'll be making more videos in the future for this channel. And thank you for listening. If you have any questions, you can ask me in the comment section, and I'll do my best in answering those. And so thank you for being here. Bye. Ciao.